All right. Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the US or abroad. Thanks for the time today. My name is TJ SCHIER. I know a lot of you. I've been a chart member since 1994, which it might be before some of you were born. So I will state that I'm the old dog that can be trained new tricks, and I'm going to share some of those with you today as we kind of focus on top 10 ways to build culture, sales, and profit. And I'll get into a little bit about my background for those of you all that don't know me, but you'll then understand why we're kind of coming at training from an operational mindset. And one of the things I think that I've always used as a mantra in the training and operations world is this quote, and I've heard it a million times. I don't know if Julie Andrews was the one that actually said this first, but it's an amateurs practice until they get it right, pros practice until they can't get it wrong. And when you think about us in the training capacity, or even if we're in an operations and in a management capacity, a lot of times when we think about doing training, we simply train it till we see somebody do things right one time. And then it's like, okay, cool, move on to the next topic, move on to the next task. And we leave somebody alone that's really not been fully trained to where they can't quite get it right, or they make mistakes. And so as I approach this both from a training and operations standpoint, that you got to train people so well that they can't get it wrong. And when they can't get it wrong, that means they've taken thinking out of it. And when they have to think, they make mistakes. It's like when I try and talk a second language that's not my natural language, my brain is trying to convert everything from English to Spanish. So I'm thinking, I'm slow, I make mistakes. So as you go through and train, that's what we want the outcome of this to be for you and your role. Because what I want you to walk away from this session is with the toolbox of a bunch of ideas so that your operations team, your leadership team, and your organization comes to you and says, training, you're the one that we go to fix fill in the blank issue. Everybody, we got an issue, go to training. Go to make that person help us solve the problem. So a little bit of a background. Some of you may or may not have heard of this company called PALS Sudden Service. They are about a 32, 33 unit drive-through only restaurant chain in the far eastern part of Tennessee, kind of up where it meets Virginia. They were the first restaurant to win the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. And I started working with them in 2005 as a consultant. And they have 2% manager turnover, 37% employee turnover. They make one mistake every 3,800 orders. They run 250 cars an hour through a single lane drive through with no technology. And when I started working with them, I really learned the importance of how operations is training and training is operations. Now, some of you may kind of report up through HR. Some of you may report to a DO or a COO or the operational role. I'm not here to argue which one of those ways are proper or the best, but to me, having been both on the operation side and the training side, there's no difference. To me, the only difference between training and operations is operations has to deal a lot more with holding people accountable. There are operational emergencies. There's not a lot of training emergencies. So a lot of training is easier because you don't have to deal with holding people accountable so much. You don't have to deal with, oh my gosh, somebody didn't show up for a shift, the restaurant got broken into, there was some sort of a catastrophe and those kind of things. But it really, my intent with this session is to get you all thinking about how you can be the go-to department for operations and really elevate yourself within the leadership of your company. So just a little bit of background. When I got into Chart in 1994, I was the director of training for Chuck E. Cheese Pizza. I stayed there until 2001. And really, thanks to my involvement in Chart, I started doing breakout sessions in Chart. I got asked to speak at the NRA show. One of the more senior Chart members saw me and says, you need to go take what you're doing and go do this on your own. And he helped me, he mentored me to get out on my own in 2001 when I started my consulting business. And in 2007, myself and a few other folks became multi-unit franchisees of Which Sandwiches. We got up to about 17 units. I got out of that business in 2021 when I joined Big Shots Golf as the COO. And they recently were purchased by Top Golf. So I'm back in the consulting space. But over the 20 plus years I was a consultant, I would go in and I always tell the story. the Palm restaurant hired me thanks to Debbie Fox, who was a chart member at the time. And I got to sit in front of the COO and or CEO of the Palm and say, why am I hiring this guy from Chuck E. Cheese to teach me at the Palm, which is on the opposite end of the food chain, how to run my business more effectively? And that's when it really occurred to me that there's no difference between training and operations. And so I'll share with you some of the wisdom that we've learned over the years. I've written a couple books. One's on employee incentives. I probably wrote that book, 22 years ago. And then our franchise group was called Smart Restaurant Group. So we wrote some smart guides to hiring ops, catering domination that came out during the pandemic and those kind of things. So I've been on all fronts. And if you guys see me on LinkedIn, I do a couple weekly leadership videos, and if all goes well in early next year, you might see a new golf entertainment concept to be named hitting the market pretty soon. But that's enough about me. Let's just kind of dive into why we're here. And I think as trainers, a lot of times we're asked to fix a lot of problems that we can't really fix. We certainly didn't cause them, but not everybody can be trained. Some people are cast in the wrong roles. GMs may hire people that really aren't in the right roles for them. And I always love this quote from Doc Rivers: average players want to be left alone. That's that C player that every organization has. A lot of restaurants have them, a lot of hotels have them. You and your time cannot be spent trying to fix the C players. They're never going to be above average. They don't want to be trained. They just want to come to work, punch in, punch out, do as little work as possible, cash a check. Your training doesn't need to be at that lowest common denominator. The good players want to be coached. That's the B player. That's where you come in. That's where these systems that you can put into place start to have an impact, because that B player goes to B plus. The great players want to be told the truth. They do want to know how good they are, but they also want to know what they need to do to improve. And this is where you all can really take a huge impact in your organization by really focusing all of your training time and attention and getting your operators, your general managers, your unit leaders to understand, look, we got to spend our time with the A players and the B players, because they'll become A plus and B plus. Let the C ones go away. You can't train some of those folks. So that may be a little bit different from what you're doing today. But again, I've spent 15 years on the operations side running $600,000 sandwich shops, 15 of those, and running multi-unit venues that were doing $8 to $10 million in golf entertainment. And it all comes down to the same thing. The GMs are going to hold the key to your success. So if you can really spend your time with the general managers, you can learn from them, you can help them grow the A players and the B players, you're going to make a big impact in your company. So as we kind of get into the top 10 list, the first one, and again, I'm going to come at these first few from an operator kind of COO hat on, saying, hey, director of training, leadership and development, L&D, whatever your title is. If I'm the COO in a brand and I'm going to work with the training department, my first bit of advice to you all is TTP, TTTP. Train the people that train the people. You all undoubtedly could go out there and probably do a killer new unit opening orientation. You could be the best certified trainer that you may have. The challenge with that is you can't train everybody. I had to learn as a COO, I can't do all these things. Yes, I might be able to do something better than somebody else, but you physically can't. So for you to have the biggest impact in your company, it does become a little more of a hands-off role, and you've got to kind of focus on those rainmaker activities. Train the people that train the people. One of the most valuable things you can do for your general managers, and many of you probably already have this in place, but it's really working with teaching your managers how to develop certified trainers so that the managers can be more of the coach and the accountability person versus the actual person doing the training. So I always tell everybody when I do my train the trainer classes, one of the things that I would recommend that you all do is show the video from Footloose. And for those of you all that are not over 30, this is the original Footloose, not the one that came out a few years ago. But Kevin Bacon was teaching this person that didn't have a lot of rhythm how to dance. I think the song was Let's Hear It for the Boys. And this is, to me, the ideal video to show somebody in a train the trainer class that takes them from I'm a good employee, how do I train somebody that's not anywhere close to me to do these kind of things. And just watching this little 3-minute video clip, we're not going to watch it here, but just to watch Kevin Bacon as the trainer train this employee how to become a better dancer is one of those things that I think you all can take back to your organization and really focus with your general managers on how to make your employees a better trainer. The second piece that kind of dovetails in, and it's almost the next step on the ladder, is really leadership development. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, and it goes along with train the people that train the people. You have to have rainmaker thinking. And I think, I know when I was in Chuck E. Cheese, when I had a consultant businesses, people would always come to me and say, TJ, train my frontline people to be better. And you all probably know this in many cases. You could train everybody, and the minute you leave, the employees in that hotel or that restaurant are going to do exactly what the general manager allows them to do. And so your focus, again, you may not be doing this in your company today, but I'm just advising you from a COO hat role what to do, and that is train the people that train the people. The more impact you can have on development of multi-unit managers and development of GMs and development of future GMs, that's how your impact on your company is going to be the most beneficial. Because if you train frontline employees, and yes, put the systems together, I get it, but if you're spending all your time training frontline employees, a lot of that can be undone by the people above them. So the more top down you can get your organization to allow you to focus on leadership development, the better. So a couple ideas in this area. I took a page out of Chipotle's career page. If you look at what they do, they lay out the career path. Hopefully if not everybody has an organizational development ladder to go from a crew member to a certified trainer. You have to go through these modules. You have to do these behaviors. You have to pass this test. You have to do this skill validation. Then you go from trainer to supervisor to manager, AGM, and on up the list. If you don't have those leadership development ladders, please I guarantee you put that on Ask My Peers. Somebody in this organization will share those with you. I think one of the things that I learned from my DO when I was working at Which was he added another layer to this leadership development ladder. And what he did was he added in book reports. And again, I know this sounds elementary schoolish, but as an example, kind of down in the bottom left of the screen, when we promoted somebody or we're going to promote somebody to certified trainer, they had to read the book 101 Ways to Make Yourself Indispensable at Work and talk to them and talk to their GM about what they learned there, because we're trying to get them out of the employee mode and more into the trainer mode and more into the leadership role. And then as an example, when they got promoted from certified trainer to supervisor, they had to read the book From Bud to Boss, because we all know people that are newly promoted supervisors often struggle with, hey, I was a friend and now you're in charge. And they can't quite get the grasp on how to manage people now that they were no longer friends with them and one person's in charge. And so again, this kind of just, anytime somebody got promoted to be a new GM, we gave them the first 90 days. And there's a million more books that can be available to you. But I would urge all of you to look through your development ladder and figure out where you can layer in these outside leadership techniques to continue to have your training program be more impactful with people as they grow up the ladder. These are just some of my favorites that I'm an audiobook person, so I listen to these more than liking to read. But again, if anybody wants to throw some of these in the chat or throw them up on Ask My Peers, again, I think this will help you bring more valuable tools to the learning and development of everybody as they move up the ladder. So again, that your company comes back to you and says, oh my gosh, we have a leadership gap on this topic. What do we do? Hey, everybody, let's get all our GMs together. We're going to read this book called Can't Hurt Me or Extreme Ownership or whatever it is. And we're going to get on a webinar and do a follow-up call and talk about how we can apply this to our business. So again, these are things that can elevate you in the eyes of your company. The last piece, again, kind of with the COO hat on, is training often gets viewed as an expense. And when we have to cut labor, we have to cut training. And, people come to me all the time and say, well, I would train employees if I had more hours separated out on the P&L. Give me training hours on the P&L. And that's from a COO hat, not trying to be unsympathetic, because I was a trainer for a long time. At the end of the day, we have to manage labor. And if they'll fix retention, there's plenty of hours to train. So as you go through and try and get a seat at the table and try and be in the leadership meetings and get to the C-suite and those kind of things, the more you can understand what the pain points are for the leaders, GMs, regional VPs, COOs, et cetera, the more they're going to start listening to you. So as you go in and build training programs, I urge you, one, to understand your business kind of finance 101. What are the average unit sales? What's your year over year same store sales, up or down? What are the COGS in your business? What's labor? What's flow through? Flow through is for every new sales dollar, you should generate 50 to 60% profit. These are some common finance terms that operational leaders use. And on the HR side, kind of on the people P&L, what's our turnover or retention percentage? You should know these numbers. And then as you build training programs to impact the business, i.e., if you build a suggestive selling contest, you can show, look, here's what our sales went up versus the prior year, because now you can quantify the impact of the training program. Or if you build some kitchen or culinary training for your organization, and you can show a COGS reduction of 0.2% or whatever the number may be, you can quantify all that. So when somebody says, why do we have to spend 5 hours training more on the culinary team, each employee, or each time we roll out a new LTO, here's why, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, COO, here's the financial impact of what we do. Too often, training is viewed as touchy-feely, and it's a nice to do. You need to make yourself invaluable to your company by making sure you fully understand the financial side of the business, and the programs that you're doing impact what your company needs. And again, that's where I said kind of speaking your leadership's language. I look back on my career, and I want to say it was, I don't know, 1996, 1997, somewhere around there. I did a breakout session in Washington, D.C. about how to use incentives to solidify training. And I'm going to share that. That's my 10th point here. But it literally was, the light bulbs went off in all the audience's head when I said, we were in these contests at Chuck E. Cheese. Birthday hosts are like full service, cashiers are like quick service. And here's how we impacted the financial performance of our organization through these sales contests. And literally, when I did that within our organization, I now had carte blanche from my leadership team, because they knew I was not going to roll out anything in the organization that wasn't a positive return on investment for the money that we were spending on training. So again, this could be a whole session. This gets into a lot of the chart competencies that you'll see at the conference next week. But again, from a COO hat, really understanding what moves the needle in business is going to be one of the things that you need to grow your leadership skills if you don't have them. And I'm more than happy to spend any time with anybody, down the road, mentoring you or helping you in this area. Point 4 is kind of the bridge into the next part of training. It's you have to understand the data. You're like doctor diagnosis with the prescriptions to fix these things. So I just talked about the financial one. I just want to give you a couple other things where I think if your company is not thinking this way already, that you can look like the hero within your organization. So as an example, if I was a director of training today, I would be looking at all my guest survey data. I've already looked at financial data. Now I'm looking at the guest survey data. So in this case, if I've got a food quality issue based on what the guest feedback is telling me, I'm going to go to my bosses and say, look, we need to work on food quality. Let me get a little team together from operations to get their input, to get their buy-in. What is it that we have that's causing these issues with food quality? And then you design a program for that, and then you roll that out, and maybe you just roll it out in a couple of units to test it, to see what happens, but you get that feedback, look at the survey data pre and post. You can then show the impact that training is having on your organization all the way to what the guest is saying. So again, it doesn't have to always be financial, but look at what the pain points are for your unit operations, whether it's a hotel or a restaurant, and try and figure out what's the guest telling you, and how can I, as the director of training, solve that problem? Because if you can go bring these problems to your boss and say, I'm going to help you fix these things, you're going to be the hero and continue to get that circle of influence bigger and bigger and bigger. Another great one is looking at the guest surveys. And this is kind of diving down a rabbit hole a little bit, but as an example, this is one of the more impactful things I've seen that I could bring to a company as an outsider, and I think you could bring to your organization. Looking at guest survey data in this example, and this was over 10 or 12,000 surveys, when a guest gave us 5 on employee friendliness versus 4 on employee friendliness, and 4 is still pretty darn solid. Unfortunately, a lot of operators just look at this and say, well, 98% of my scores are 4s or 5s. Hey, that's great, Scooter. However, the idea is to get people over 80% giving you 5s. And so when you think about those kind of things, when you looked at the data, if somebody gave us a 5 on employee friendliness, 91% of those people gave us a 5 on the taste of the food. When somebody gave us a 4 on employee friendliness, 37% of the people gave us a 5 on the taste of the food. Now, the reason I tell you this is because we're diving a little bit deeper into the data from the example you just saw. I don't really have a food quality problem in this organization. What I have is an employee friendliness problem. And so as doctor diagnosis, when you go in there as this surgeon to understand, why are my food scores low? Oh my gosh, look at this. If we just get a 4 on friendliness, we almost never get a 5 on taste of the food. But if we get a 5 on friendliness, we almost never miss a 5 on food. So get into your data, look at it, make the diagnosis and the prescription, because in this case, instead of really working with the culinary team on a food problem, it's really the service team. And so again, I think these are the kind of things that you can help build your culture, build yourself as a learning organization, and embed yourself with operations to fix the problems that they're struggling with all the time. Now, I'm going to kind of get into a little bit of more of the how we deliver the training, and maybe even some of the fashions that or formats that you deliver in. And none of these things are going to really cost a lot of money. But when I look at culture as an example, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides, but orientation oftentimes is a trip to the principal, or it's literally, oh my gosh, we didn't even know you were starting. Today's your first day. Yeah, grab a uniform, go clock in, go see so-and-so, they're the trainer. And if you ever saw that old movie Waiting, it's like, yeah, go back in the dry storage and watch the training videos for an hour and a half and I'll come and get you. If you really want to create a high performance organization, I learned this from Disney and the Ritz-Carlton. They actually let everybody be a guest their first day. So when we got to Big Shots Golf, and I don't know if Cassie or Jay Polner, a couple of people from the training team that were working with us at Big Shots at the time, but they put together a program that was to me one of the coolest things we ever did. So at a new unit opening venue, imagine 150 employees, and this was one of our facilities in College Station. The first day, so the employee orientation at a brand new venue, we had the training team, the management team. We essentially were the service staff, and we took care of 150 new employees, welcomed them in, put them through the entire guest experience. They got to play golf, play the games, eat our food, taste all the amazing stuff that Chef Brian made. And then after an hour and a half, we got them all together in our event space, and then we started to go through orientation. And what the whole point of this is the old begin with the end in mind. You just spent 90 minutes learning what the outcome of everything we do is, which is, what do we want our guests to feel like? How you just felt in those 90 minutes here. Now I'm going to spend the rest of your training teaching you how to do those kind of things. So if you can work slowly on getting this type of an orientation, and I know you may be sitting there going, I work for a quick service restaurant. Okay, you know what? I ran a sandwich shop. All right, it's the same thing. You come in, you put them through the guest experience. They understand what the concept is. They understand why you're here. And from your standpoint, you got to teach the why. So I think really getting your organization to focus on quality orientations that are fun, that really spell out the culture, and ultimately get them to understand what the guest experience is all about, because that's why you're training people. So the next piece kind of leads right into culture. And this one's a tough one, but I think orientation, as I just mentioned, is kind of the first step in moving your organization culture the right direction. I will tell you with 100% certainty that the culture is literally dependent on who the general manager is. You have great GMs, they probably have a great culture, whether you have any impact on it or not. You have a poor GM, they probably have a miserable culture, whether you have all the great systems or not. So as I talked about earlier with rainmaker thinking, it's real hard for you to impact the front line without really having the general managers tied to your hip and spending a lot of your time working with your GMs. And I think the best example that I can tell, and I actually brought when I was at Big Shots, I brought some of our leadership team to Walk-Ons, which is an up and coming sports bar concept. And again, others may do this. No disrespect to anybody else out there, but when Scott Taylor was their president, I know Kendall Ware, a good friend of mine's their COO right now. They do this thing called the Rumble. It's a pre-shift, but there's a story to the Rumble and why it came on. This is Brandon Landry, who was the founder, and he talked about how the restaurant, the second one they opened, was just a disaster. They shut it down. They literally lied to the guests, said, we have a gas leak and we got to shut. Everybody get out of the building. They literally shut the business down. And then they came up with this Rumble that's like a pre-shift hype. I mean, it's like kind of the walkout before you go out of the locker room to go hit the stage or hit the football stadium or whatever. And so what I call it is operationalizing the brand. And what they did at Walk-Ons, as an example, when you play basketball or a college sport, if you are on the team your freshman year, but you don't play, you wear a red shirt. And you can notice everybody down in the bottom left there, they're wearing a red shirt. So when you go to a new unit opening there at Walk-Ons, all the new trainees are wearing red shirts. And it fits into their brand. We're a walk-on. Walk-ons have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. We got to work a little bit harder, and they earn the uniform. So at the end of training, they have this big celebration where everybody gets rid of their red shirt and they get to put on the walk-ons uniform. That's how training can help operationalize the brand and bring what marketing is doing and creating this story that's really out for the guest, bringing it internally in there. So that as a trainer, I would urge you to really look at what the marketing and the branding piece is. What's the story of your brand? What's the origin story? To use an example here further at Big Shots, our tagline for the consumer was, here everyone's a big shot. And so we want everybody to make sure you feel like a big shot, not from an ego big man on campus, but more of that feeling of, yes, I did this. I got a golf ball in the air and I've never done that before. Well, we took here everyone's a big shot, which is what the marketing team created. And then our training team took that and really built that into everything else that we did. We're going to make our employees feel like a big shot. We're going to promote from within. I told everybody I'd never wanted to hire another general manager from the outside. We wanted everybody here. We had the right people here. We just had to get everybody instilled with that culture of everybody's a big shot. And so I think the Walk-Ons is a great one. It's one of my business crushes. And I would urge you, when you're looking about training and culture, it's what can you do to operationalize your brand, get that origin story, get the taglines from marketing, and then figure out how to give these tools to your general managers to help them impact the culture in their restaurants. Now, the next couple things, you guys, some of these will be old news to you. Some of these things might be new. Micro-learning is obviously all the rage these days. And 100 years ago, Jim Knight, longtime chart member, good friend of mine, said, train in the language they dream in, because when he worked at Hard Rock Cafe, they were in like 40 countries. They literally had to train in other languages. What it means these days is people's brains are wired different. They want to just learn. They don't want to learn information. They want to just know where it is, when it is, and if I need it. Where is it when I need it? And just go tell me how to find that stuff. Because that's how their brains today are wired. My brain wasn't wired like that when I went. We had to memorize stuff. So if you're into micro learning, I would urge you. There's vendors and chart partners that work with us. The more you can break your chunks of training materials into very small bits and repetitively get these out to people, it will help you move people's performances. It'll also help your general managers move their performances, because when they sit there and think, what am I going to do for a pre-shift huddle? I don't have anything to talk about today. Think back to my survey data says this. Hey, Mr. or Miss GM, you're working on speed of service. Here's a couple micro learning bits that you can talk about in your pre-shifts this week. Hey, Mr. or Miss GM, you're having a problem with employee friendliness. Why don't you watch these couple learnings or put your team through these exercises? So again, think about how this all fits together. Look what the diagnosis is by restaurant, by concept, by the brand, and put some of these small bits out there. I mean, there's really cool things that you can do to communicate with your staff. even if, again, a lot of times we think we tell everything to the GMs, but then what happens here? So, one of the things we used at Big Shots was a thing called Go Happy, and a lot of the vendors can do this, but it was a text platform that we could create some real good communication with the staff. We're doing a new LTO. All the servers got an LTO that said, here's the LTO training for that. Here's how you sell this new appetizer. Here's the new cocktail. The kitchen got, here's how you make that new item. So the managers, it was very easy. They could get everybody together, go, okay, hey, the thing's launching tomorrow. Let's go through a little 5-minute pre-shift on kitchen. What do you need to know? Servers, what do you need to know? Cashiers, front desk at a hotel, whatever the case may be. And then some of these things are really great because you can use these for two-way recognition, employee surveys. Again, data. What are the employees saying? What are they frustrated with on the front line? Bring that back out as the doctor diagnosis, as the director training. Hey, I looked at all the employee surveys. Here's what I think we should be doing, Mr. or Mrs. Boss, to improve our employee culture and to improve the employee survey data by using some of these communication tools. AI is all the rage. I always think it's like, man, we got all this artificial intelligence. Let's talk about some of the natural intelligence. Everybody's probably heard of ChatGPT. It's amazing. I'm looking at creating a new brand, and so I've been working through like how to formulate a business plan, something that I really haven't had to do in a long time. Or how do I brand this? And it's amazing that you can just get into a ChatGPT and start saying, create me a logo, create me a menu. What do you think I should put here? And the more and more the prompts are, write me a job description for a busboy, whatever, a host, or whatever the case may be. Most of y'all have probably used some of these things, and I would continue to urge you to continue to do them. But you have to be the safety net. You have to be the kind of the guardian of the standard. Don't just give ChatGPT a prompt and send it out to the field. Make sure you've reviewed it. It's on brand. It's in your language. It's in your terminology, your jargon. But it's a great way to get a lot of stuff done quickly, because then you can just edit what it's giving you, or throw in a few more prompts to refine it versus trying to build everything from scratch. There's other things that are available, like Issue, ISSUU, you can see here. You can just take files and this will convert them into all kinds of different things for you. So if you want to do, as an example, a flip book for job reference over by a POS terminal or by an expo window with product charts, if you need to put them into articles for manuals and those kind of things, these are kind of more from a marketing aspect. But these are the tools that are available out there to you right now that you can build it once from a training standpoint, and then use this software to kind of convert it into different formats, kind of going back to Jim's quote of train in the language they dream in. Some people want to be visual, some people want to read, some people want to listen. These are the kind of things that are available to you to make your life easier so that you can spend more time delivering the tools that the GMs need to move the culture forward, move sales forward, move profit forward. I can't say this one out loud because mine will kick on here in a second, but this is one of the coolest devices out there. And I don't know how many of you all have thought about using these things. However, there is a function in this called skill blueprints. So if you can imagine, you can build these for Alexa or Siri, whoever it is, sorry if it kicks on. But you can actually, hey, what is the recipe for X? You can build these blueprints and put them into these devices. So you imagine having an Alexa back there at the bar, as an example. Hey, how do you make an old fashioned? Or in the kitchen, what's the recipe for pico de gallo? Whatever the case may be. You can build these things in there because, again, this generation doesn't want to know information. They want to know where to find it. And ultimately, we just want the employees to do things right, make them properly so the guest has a great experience. And so putting together something like a simple Alexa or a Siri tool in your kitchen may be a great way for you to have a resource that's available, that's easy to update. There's not a lot of cost. There's nothing to print other than buying the hardware. So I would urge you guys to look at things like this that are artificial intelligence to move training forward. The last piece is incentives. And again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but to me, the incentives teach general managers the importance of catching people doing things right. The importance of rewarding performance that's better than past performance, not necessarily trying to compete one server against the other one because that server always wins because they have the best section, they work the busiest shifts, all the myriad of excuses. you can use incentives as a powerful training tool. So as an example, again, kind of one word of caution here, back to your GMs, you can't get the wrong person to do the right thing. The incentives are not going to move the C player. The incentives are not going to fix the culture in a restaurant or a hotel that has a poor general manager. But what you can do is teach your managers the importance of training and use incentives to do that by, as an example, giving them a fraction of the action. Hey, if you want to drive catering sales in your restaurant or off premises, or if you want to drive event sales, or sell more of the LTO, fill in the blank for what item, give the employees a fraction of the action, 5 cents for every dollar. Maybe you bring us a cost saving idea. They get 5 cents of every dollar. That may be countercultural to your current organization today, and I get it, but ask to test this in one restaurant or one hotel property or one part of the restaurant or the hotel property to get some data. Because again, if you show your boss, I spent $100 on incentives and we made $1,000 on sales, they're not going to argue with you too often, because they shouldn't be complaining about the $100 because you netted out $900 less whatever cost of goods sold you had on those items. So fraction of the action is a good way. Doing things like sales bingos to get people, whether it's a server or a cashier, out of selling the same old stuff they always sell, creating bingo cards so they have to sell different things and treat each guest as an individual instead of doing everything the same way. You can do this with a host or a front desk. Again, just getting them to engage in conversation, because ultimately, as a trainer, when somebody says, how good's your training program, you should look at your guest scores, because that to me is the ultimate outcome of what you do here. Is, what are my guest survey scores saying? If my guest survey scores are not high, I have a training problem. Now, the training may be the GM, it may be the front line, et cetera. But whenever anybody said to me, how do you judge how good your training program is? I always look at the guest survey scores. I look at the financials, because that's what really matters to your guests and your boss. This is a great way to fix order accuracy. Get all the orders right. For every hour you have no mistake, nothing that gets past your standard cook time. You maybe put a dollar in a suggestion box, and at the end of the week, the kitchen divides up how much money's in there. The point of these things it's to help you give a tool to your GMs to understand how training can become more effective if you incentivize and measure what. So those are just a few ideas there. Here's a few kind of, off the hard to quantify ideas. Find the dot, clean the spot. Put a bunch of day dots around a dirty kitchen and people get points or rewards for finding those things. Doing closest to the pin contest. What I mean by that is not how many of these are you going to sell today, but hey, what's our food cost going to be this week? And get everybody using a daily lesson in a pre-shift huddle about food costs. What do we need to work on food costs? What was it last week? What's off? How can we fix that? To get some of your employees to manage the B and C players while the manager is not looking. Or hey, what are our sales going to be this week? Because we want all of our employees to know what our business is all about. What are the revenues? What are the costs? We used a thing called Bonusly. It was great because our employees could just get Bonusly points. Somebody wins a contest, we give them 100 Bonusly points. So this is a recognition account, and they could then go in there and pick gift cards that they wanted, or they could donate the money to charity as an example. They could actually give rewards or kind of high fives to other people. Hey, thanks for covering my shift here today. 10 points, pat on the back. You have to manage this. It can get abused. There's ways that you can put some structure around these things, but managing an employee incentive program, it's fairly easy these days with companies like Bonusly, and I think there's some other ones out there as well. So, my one caveat on incentives is a quote from the infamous Charles Barkley a few years ago that said, Gatorade doesn't help people that suck. Incentives are not going to help the wrong person do the right thing. And so again, training can't help people that suck. You can't really focus on that C player, the C manager. You have to have those conversations with that person's boss and try and eventually work that person out of the system. But in a nutshell, and I went 2 minutes over, so I apologize at 43 minutes in here. Here's a recap of the 10 pieces that we covered. Tara, I guess I'll open it up at this point for Q&A. And then I will just throw out my contact information here when we're wrapping up on the last slide. So,
okay. One question was sent in, and then you answered it already. So we're going to skip over that one.
Cool.
And then the next one is, as a trainer, how can you get operations to buy into some of the initiatives and things you want done?
So it's a great question. So as a trainer, how can you get operations to buy in? My ultimate suggestion is find somebody in your company that's an advocate for you and what you're doing. So as an example, if I wanted to do a book report for leadership development, or if I wanted to try that new orientation program or a pre-shift huddle to really work on culture, find that GM that's your advocate that you know, and get him or her to put some of these things into place, help you quantify that, and then have that person be your advocate with their peer group, i.e. the other general managers or multi-unit managers or whoever that is, to say, look, I did this in my restaurant or my hotel, here's what worked, we need to do this everywhere, because then they can drive that up the operations chain if you're not. And that way you got to start small, quantify everything, because as we all know, operators tend to not argue with data, especially their own data. So get that idea into one of your advocates and then let them be your spokesperson from there.
Okay, next question is, can you make C players into A or B players?
What I would tell you is they're probably just in the wrong role. C players in that role typically are not going to be above average in that role. And one caveat with that is I'll use myself as an example. In my opinion, I'm an A player at work. I don't need a lot of motivation. I'm going to go do this. I'm a B player in working out. And what I mean by that is if I go to the gym by myself, I probably burn 300 calories in an hour. But if I go work out with a personal trainer, I'll burn 900 calories. I will work as hard as that person allows me to work. When it comes to dunking a basketball, I'm a C player. You could give me the best basketball coach in the world, I'm never going to be able to dunk a basketball. So while I'm not a C person, I'm a C player in that role. So I just have to be put in the right role. And so I think if you can help your GMs understand who the C players are and find out maybe they're just in a wrong role. This person shouldn't be out front. Then maybe they can be back in the back of the house, or vice versa. Or you know what, maybe this is not the career for them. I would not spend a lot of time trying to make the C's into B's or A's, because it's going to be a ton of work with a little return.
Okay, next is, how do you recommend L&D work with ops training effectively?
God, these are great questions. I think the best thing that I would recommend to get started is get operations input first. Where do they think they need help? Now, that's not to say they're going to give you the right answer, but they're going to give you the answer that they think that they need the most help with. So I would get that input. I would look at the data, whether it's surveys, financials, talk, COO, regional VP, depending on how big your organization are, and really kind of assess what the opportunities are out there, and then prioritize those, the ones that you can get the biggest impact on. So as an example, if ops gives me something that maybe not number one on my list, it's 3, but it's number 1 on their list, I might put that one as priority 1 first, because that way I'm building credibility. They look at me now as I listen to them, I solved their problem, they were an advocate for me. Now they're going to be more likely to work with you when you need help from them. And so I think that, again, always just getting input from them first is critical, and then look at the data second, and then prioritize it third.
Okay, how do you approach language barriers in the training resources? Love the shout out to Alexa and AI. When we talk about microlearning, I have struggled to be inclusive across languages.
Good question. Not sure I have the answer to that, other than what I would. There's a million language translation services out there, and I believe even things like Opus, who's one of the chart partners, they do a lot of that translation for you. So I would find a technology partner that can do that for you. Worst case, and I would enlist an employee that is bilingual in the language that you're trying to get everybody focused on, and have them take your content and put it into the language that your employees are going to understand. Because a lot of times when you run through translators, they're very literal. It's not really kind of how people say things or how they talk. So I think that's one of those things that I would look at your staff to help you kind of do that internally, and then work with some of the resource partners that can help you on the translation pieces.
Okay, I have another one is, how do you reprimand poor performance?
Oh, wow, that could be fun. There's a lot of ways not to do it. I think first and foremost, if I was working with my GMs, I would tell them as step one is to evaluate their whole team. Who are my A's? Who are my B's? Who are my C's? I would tell them to have each of their managers independently rate everybody, and then the management team sit down. And because the biggest problem I think you're going to find is I may rate somebody an A and another manager rates them a C. Well, I'm treating that person differently than the other manager is, and they're going to want to work with me and not that other person. And you have to get that consistency across management teams and how we're treating the staff clear to them. Then you sit down with the employees and have those conversations with, you're an A, and here's what we need you to do. You're a B, here's what we need. You're a C, we really need you to do this. I think teaching the GMs to have those tough conversations, because most of them don't, they're afraid to. We are doing a disservice to our team if we have C players and they don't know they're a C player. That's not fair to them. And so I think this would be a great chance for you all to work with your GMs and go through this exercise of the A's, B's, and C's, and then provide them some real role play examples and some templates for how to coach people through from a C that we want to move into another area, a C to try and at least get them to a B, or a C to kind of encourage them to go elsewhere. Those are some of the things that I think I would do in those cases to try and help have some of those tough conversations.
Okay, I think I have two more questions. Can you recommend a great leadership book that is an easy read but powerful? Most of our general managers are English as a second language.
That's a good question. Not off the top of my head. I mean, all these leadership books, there's so many different things. I would think that just teaching them how to manage time and empathy are probably two of the biggest skills that I would urge people to look at. If I come up with some books, I'll throw it on Ask My Peers specific to that topic. But I can't think of one off the top of my head. If anybody has one, throw it in the chat.
Okay, two other questions have come in. Now, I've seen articles pop up lately about the death of the LMS and how modules and required learning may be counterproductive as a tool. What are your thoughts on successful LMS utilization?
This is from an LMS vendor. I'm just kidding, not sure, but I think the learning management systems, if they're used as a hammer, are ineffective. If people are using these things because they have to check the box, it defeats the purpose and it hurts the culture. If it is a tool where, as a learning and development professional, I can, as an example, let's just say I do an LTO rollout and I look across all the units and certain units didn't do the required training. It's not filled out in the LMS. What I would do is I would look at the sales of those and the surveys, maybe specific as an example to an LTO, look at the guest survey. So I could go to my boss and instead of saying, hey, store X isn't doing the LMS and I sound like a whiner, I could do something more along the lines of, look, these stores did the training and look at their survey scores. These stores did not and look at their scores, tying it back to the data of what the outcome of the training was. So I think dashboards and LMSs are helpful tools. But again, if people are just doing it to kind of check a box and say, I did that, that's not really, you're not really having a training culture. I just saw David Jones pop in Excellence Wins by Horst Schulze for the GM book. I had a picture of that on there. It's a great book. And I would highly recommend it for people that just kind of, and fans first, if you want to look at like guest service, and just, Fans First by Jesse Cole, who owns the Savannah Bananas. To me, they're universal books that have a very high probability of applicability to GMs.
Okay, two more questions. What would you recommend L&D do to connect different generations and age groups with each other during an orientation period?
Ooh, that's a great one. I would love to hear people's suggestions on that, but since we're kind of running toward pushing the hour here, I think just mixing and mingling groups. Imagine doing a game like a Trivial Pursuit or some sort of game show where you have questions from the 70s that a younger generation's not going to know, and the questions from the 2010s that an older generation might not know. But doing some sort of game show or a game where you have the teams mixed up, or even it could be an icebreaker roundtable exercise, just to get people to understand the differences of the generations and those kind of things. Because like we saw this at Big Shots. I mean, our first employee we hired was my age. He was in his late 50s. But he was our OG. He stayed, he was the OG, and everybody looked at him like grandpa. But it was awesome. And, we learned stuff from the younger generation. They learned stuff from us. And the more I think you can do that through networking and icebreakers, or, putting them together when they're doing breaks. So if you have breaks in the training at a new unit opening venue, getting them in the same groups, it'll really help.
Okay, and the last question I have right now is, how do you convince leadership there is still the need for trainers when they believe technology can do the training?
Ooh, awesome question. That's probably a good one to end on, because that is like the drop the mic question. To me, technology replaces a lot of what in the past had to be done by a trainer to transfer knowledge. And in the past, it could have been a book, a video, a manual, a video, a DVD, e-learning, whatever. Technology transfers knowledge to the new person in the way they choose to consume it, especially if we offer it multiple ways. What that then allows you to do, and it actually magnifies the ability, is for the trainer to spend more time on coaching and behavior. So if they do the technology piece first, i.e., they learn what the station setup should be, they learn the steps of how to make that hamburger, but then they come out there. Now the trainer can focus his or her time solely on coaching behaviors and practice and repetition, instead of the trainer wasting all their time doing the classroom and the teaching of the knowledge. That it's really the 1-2 punch. Technology can give you the knowledge. The trainer, though, needs to be there for the performance and the behaviors and the repetition and coaching.
Okay, I think that's all of our questions. TJ, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Perfect. Appreciate everybody coming on. Thanks. It was great, and happy to help however.
Bye-bye, everyone. The webinar will be on the website at chart.org by the end of the day. Bye.